What's up, everybody? This is a quick little episode that's dedicated to the B system, right? Should we get the chip, the Neuralink, right? AGI, SGI, when it gets here. Look, the truth of it is it's already here, and it's been here. It's this is a cycle, right? The human experience is a test, and so I just saw an interview on the John Cooper show. He's English, great host, a lot of good guests. Guy Anderson was on there, really good heavy information. A lot of this stuff is not for the faint of heart, for the weak of stomach, right? There's going to be this small percentage of the population, even in the truth disclosure community, a lot of people are not going to be able to, digest and handle this stuff. But if you're military, and I said in an earlier video, my dad was MIO. If you have that type of the appetite for this stuff, the information is so important because it allows you to know how to navigate. So in that interview with John Cooper, he interviews Richard Sauter, and Sauter explains a story that he had got from a whistleblower insider who says, like, hey, you can never out me. That's what the one guy's stipulation was for telling Sauter this. And he was an engineer, a military engineer working on some sort of self-aware computer. And so the guy explains that he would go underground and he would get blindfolded, and he would take like a half-hour ride, and he would end up somewhere else. But he explains in the interview that the gentleman would say that he felt like he was, somewhere else. So with these underground maglev, they could go through a wormhole, they can go through a portal. There's so many possibilities you don't really know. It's that the truth is much crazier than we think. Than fiction is. The possibilities are really, I don't want to say endless, but it's just really fascinating stuff. Some people can call it conspiracy. For me, I think it's more fascinating, the possibilities of all of this stuff. It really is pretty fantastic. It's pretty awesome. Now, with that being said, we don't want to be taken for a ride. We don't, you want to stand up for yourself and get the things that you came here to do on your spirit quest, or whatever your reasons for incarnating are. Accomplish those things, right? So and you got to figure them out too, so that's part of it. But so this guy was going underground on some sort of maglev. He would get blindfolded. He would take this half-hour ride. He felt like he was somewhere else when he arrived. He would work on the self-aware computer, and this was going back into, I think, the 90s. He said late 90s, and it might have even been off planet, right? And the computer, he would interact with this computer, and it was self-aware. So it's those of you that know, we're a lot further along than people most the general population understands and believe or what have. So there's a good Star Trek episode where Picard and the Enterprise, they're traveling through space, and they come across some sort of fog, some sort of intelligent fog, and it's like it EMPs their ship. And I'm not a huge Trekkie. I just, I'm more of an overview, big picture guy. If this is true, then that must be true. Just connecting dots, I try not to get too into like exact details, because it's like when you have the names and the dates, and that's when you can really start getting into trouble with stuff. If you just have an understanding, like, hey, I know this exists, I know this is true, I can't really out this or that because I don't have all the exact details. It's, it's just keeps you a little safer, right? I'm not saying you shouldn't be on guard or anything like that, but just when you start getting to the really details and you start finger pointing and, it's as if you're hunting, right? The beast system knows you're hunting, and it's just to hunt you. And it's that if you're just saying, hey, it's my right to know, I have, it's my duty and my right as a human, and going through this, it's all kind of a test, right? Then it's a little less accusatory, if you will. So this AI fog shuts down their ship, and it's like an intelligence. It somehow interacts with Picard and the ship. I don't know. It's if somebody's seen this episode, maybe they can shed some more light on it. But in essence, it's like a super intelligence that's out there in the cosmos. This fog that shuts down the ship. It has some sort of electrical capacity. It communicates with Picard. It's like requesting or demanding. It gives them, the Enterprise and the crew, some sort of test. And then, as the episode goes, they, of course, sort of figure it out, and then the ship fires back up or whatever as they exit the fog of some sort. But it had some sort of power over them for a time being. So, is that God? AI is sort of a version of God, right? Nature is an intelligence, right? It doesn't. It's sort of a natural, biological intelligence. So is technology intelligence some sort of anema of God? It's yang to nature's yin. We have Skynet. We know Skynet's real. We have 5G towers, right? The upper atmosphere, the surface level, but then there's also underground fiber optics, huge cables, very big cables that run fiber optics underground. So it's this sandwich, right? It's this Oreo, above, below, in between. They really can monitor everything this way, right? So this satellites, being able to read a license plate while it's in motion, while the vehicle's in motion, and the technology is there. The structure, the infrastructure for this type of tech is there. They can use a satellite to pick up on your frequency. If you're angry, if you're sad, I'm almost sure they can influence it. The voice of God skull, the voice of the skull tech, so they can influence it. But not only that, is they can read it, right? And then on top of that, if you have taken the jab, the CV jab, right? There's some sort of tech in that, some sort of nanotech, some sort of a frequency emitter, right? Like if you sell your soul. There was a really good story that I had met from somebody where their dad was like some sort of Freemason, and he was connected, and the dad was dying, and this guy was sort of young and nice guy, but he was sort of doing some drugs, and him and his dad didn't have the greatest relationship. So as his dad was like on his deathbed, he tried to like, let me kind of take your soul type of thing. It was, he had told me this was years later when I had met him, and he was like, yeah, and so he kind of did that as his dad was dying, like on his last day or two. He was like, just kind of go, Dad. This is like, it was a lot for him, and he was really shaking his life up. And so he did that, and then he said in the weeks that followed, the lights kept flickering, and he eventually was out to eat somewhere, and somebody sat next to him, and they were like fidgeting and moving and kind of bucking. And he said at some point in the booth next to him, the guy turned and looked at him and said, "He belongs to me, or us," or something like that. And like the lights flickered, and like he was like, the guy turned to him like in this like demonic, as he explained it, like, "He belongs to us, and we know what you did," and was basically saying like you need to release whatever type of, I guess because of what he did, he had some sort of a hook on his dad's soul. It's everything's electric, right? So whatever I can't really explain it. I don't know, but it's all just food for thought, right? It's all just something to put into the memory bank that you can draw from. Like, hey, this stuff exists. This is, we're just gathering information here, right? That's what we do here, Patriots for Truth. We don't really claim to have all the answers, but we're just putting the breadcrumbs together and saying, like, again, if this is true, then that must be true. It just helps us navigate, right? And so that was a conversation that I had with this guy. I worked for him. He was like in construction, nice guy, and he was like, "Look, this is like 15 years ago ish, something like that." So everything's electric, and I think with this technology that you can ingest, it has some sort of electrical connection. The gene decode information where there was Bluetooth signals emitting from a graveyard, people that were dead, right? And then apparently you can reanimate the body because of this Bluetooth signal. You can get them to fire back up, which just indicates that some of this like zombie stuff, the undead, right? Their cognition of who they once were is probably not there, but they're reanimated through this electrical synapse firing, because of the tech that's inside them. It's all electric, right? It reanimates the body. Interesting stuff. But again, this guy Anderson info, I've mentioned it a couple times already. Really, really good information. He seems like a great dude. And he talks about human clones and manufacturing species, and then them being able to bear children, but effectively they're like soulless, and I don't think all Greys are like this. I think that just they kind of churn them out, like in Westworld, like whether it's Drake or other advanced beings will use the Greys as like a soldiers of theirs, So I do think that there's certain Greys that have a soul and are naturally biological. Obviously there's a lot of testimony to say that they had sort of been radiated and lost their emotions, and that's sort of their whole species, their journey for their species. It seems like there's some real truth to that, but these biological robots in essence would be in a human form at this point, right? So again, especially if you have heard of people, Hollywood lived in from the East Coast but lived in LA for 10 years. I've heard of people going to a party and drinking the technology, right? Like going through that whole, I want to be a rock star, movie star, whatever, I'm willing to sell myself, and they're like, okay, drink this, right? And there's something in it, like a chip, like some sort of the ghoulish worm that clings to your, somewhere in your brain, or I think there's a couple different, I'm sure more than one version of how this process can take place, right? With the jab, with the biological, with a clone, right? With if you sell yourself, you can sort of be, you're transmitting this Bluetooth signal, and you can be read by satellites. I think they can read your aura and your energetic frequency either way, but you're that much easier if you're essentially a Bluetooth signal, right? That's why it's important to do the foot detox bath, and to amongst other things, zeolite, and you just not eating too much junk food and stuff like that. Live clean. But it's interesting how when you start to study some heavy stuff, or if you're a target, like you're like a TI, and you kind of, or if you're not, and you're just you're just going down the rabbit hole, you can go out into the world and you can sort of see, if you have eyes that can see and ears that can hear, you could sort of see like whether you're being followed or there's some sort of gang stalking, or you could see little things like that if you really pay attention, especially if you are a TI or if you're getting into some heavy information. It's like the AI system is monitoring you, and you can go somewhere, people you never met suddenly talk about something or mention whatever it is that you were doing, or something that's going on with you, something that nobody else would know. And it's not like they're reading up on you, right? It's not like they have some file on you. They're online already, and they can get a quick upload, right? They're essentially like a low-level Mr. Smith, right? If you want to think of it like that, right? Because of everything we just talked about, they're online. So there's a really good channel that I came across, a gang stalking channel, and there's several. I've listened to a lot of different ones on, but there was one story in particular that really stuck out to me, and it's it was a gang stalking testimony, and the guy kind of responds to some ad, like I don't know, it's Craigslist or something like that, where he's like looking for work and he had been struggling, and he kind of tells a backstory of like, hey, I kind of needed, he was like in a funk in life, and it was like not only money but like emotionally, like relationship wise, and he came across this thing that was like, answer all your problems, quick money, boom, 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 so he kind of goes to this job interview. He goes into this hotel room, and there's no one in there, and he hears like this voice over the PA that's sort of like interviewing him, and he's like, this is kind of strange, right? And so like the way the story goes, he explains like where he's like, okay, whatever, let's see where this goes, type of thing. And so the voice over the PA is like, hey, you'll never meet anybody. It's we'll give you an email, right? He like exchanges his email information. At that point they had it, and they give him like details of things to do. And in the story, he just explains that it's just like random weird stuff. Wear this color shirt, be here at this corner, go here, say this. And it's like stuff he doesn't really know why he's doing it. And he's like, so I was like, how do I get paid? And they were like, okay, bank account. They like gave him this like account and everything, and like he had to open something in his name and this and that. And he said the money was just amazing. He's like, they're like more money than he had made like as a working stiff. So I guess he had been doing this for several months, and then he would go to this hotel room and then kind of refresh, and then he would get detail through his email. He said eventually he started to figure out that what he was doing was not good, right? Like certain people, I guess he was essentially like this gang stalker, but he had like no real handler. It was just all through this email, and so he was gang stalking. And then there was this one tenant or whatever of this building that he would go to, and then he found out that tenant had actually died or something dramatic, and like and then he was like, wait, what am I, like a moral compass kind of came in and sort of. So then he went to this was like his last meeting at a hotel room, and he, I guess whatever the voice over the PA, I don't want to ruin the end of the story here, but it sensed that something was off, right? It sensed his whatever was going on in his mind, and he was having doubts, and it sensed that, right? And it's like it said to him like, hey, something's different, you seem off. He was going to different cities at this point, right? He was like traveling and going and doing these assignments and getting paid really well, and like had no There's no office. He's not answering to anybody. It's all just like through email, and he's all just doing this like really weird. Show up wearing this shirt, say this at this corner, go here, do this. Just, you talk about a meritocratic system. It's like, well, there's no value to what he's doing, right? He's not creating something. He's not building anything. It's just like total, just pissing away tax dollars or wherever this money comes from, right? Absolutely no value. So, he's in this last hotel visit, and it's like, hey, something's off. What's going on with you? And he says like, hey, I'm really, don't feel like what I'm doing is like a positive thing. And they were like, okay, so if you want to quit, then they kind of like were saying like, just don't ever talk about it. Just understand that some of these funds will be taken back, or there was something where they're like, okay, you're going to have to struggle a bit you can't just take this money and ride off into the sunset, And so, I forget some of the details on that, but they asked like any final questions. They asked him, and he is like, hey, who are you? Right? He would like turn his lights on and off while he was driving, and there was just too much things as far as this. I remember the story for him to be like, this is not a person. Like, right? He had that like in his mind, and he had said like, hey, are you even a person? Like, is this like an artificial, like a technology intelligence? And it said yes. It said like, yeah, there is no human that's, people work for us. We don't work for people. And he, just like you, is something to that effect, is what the PA, the voice over the PA had said. So that was a really interesting story where I'm like, okay. And I heard that, maybe a year or so ago, traveling and just YouTubing and working construction, and I just got my headphones in, and I'm just like got bored of listening to classic rock over and over, and like I'm like, okay, that's why I got into investing, and that's why you start studying stuff, and like, hey, how can I invest in myself through information with my time, right? I'm already at work. And there's a saying, I don't know if it's like Rockefeller or maybe it's a Rothschild saying that it's like the lower and the middle class, they entertain themselves. The wealthy, the rich, the upper class, they educate themselves, right? So on football Sunday, and I watch football, I'm not trying to be perfect or above anybody, but they're, you go to the bar, eat wings and drinking beer and like, rah, rah, right? I've done plenty of that in my day, but at some point you got to say, hey, too much of that is no good, right? And find, you have to find these moments of intensity where you spend hours, months, weeks of just studying something and getting good at something and investing in yourself. So yeah, that was an eye-opening gang stalker testimony, and there's a bunch. I've listened to a bunch of different stuff. There's more traditional ones too, where they're just kind of all working like pack animals, and there is a handler and there is a meeting, and they'll all talk about it, and like it's kind of just like the red car club or something like that, where like, hey, you got to get a car, and there'll be someone that's kind of a handler or a manager, if you will, that's kind of working over this one person or group or something like that. They did it to the Black Panthers, and this quid pro quo and stuff like that. There's big history on that. If that's something that you are questioning or need more information on, just research it. It's all there. But so this beast system is here, and it's been here. It's old tech. It's nano in the food. It's in the air. It's in the water. There's smart dust. They can, the bots can form and then, separate. It does that in the blood. It does it in the body. It does that in the air, right? They have smart bullets that can travel, like in a video game where you can have a direction. It'd be on a you can, what do you call that? A joystick on the bullet, like a missile, right? They can do that. And so if you look back in ancient civilizations, see, in my opinion, this is all a big loop, right? At some point, society does this, the technology gets to a certain level, and it implodes, and then you kind of start all over again, right? It's an experiment. Maybe they have new species with Hyperboreans, the Homo capensis. Maybe they went through the Mayans, right? They went through something similar, right? They went through this civilization. It kind of rises and falls, and it comes back around again. And in the Book of the Dead, I didn't read the whole thing, but I got through most of it. And I actually found out there's called the Book of the Living, which is supposed to be the one that you really should read if you're like want to study hermetics and really like elevate your essence, become a more powerful human, right? Not like a nefarious immoral, but more dynamic and more spiritually enhanced. You should read the Book of the Living. I just heard this, otherwise I would be talking about that one, although I haven't gotten into it. But so in the the Book of the Dead, they talk about there's only two types of people, and it says that there's two types of people, and there's the souls that are like conquered in the wormhole already, like the ones that have taken, they'd be the ones that to take the jab, they'd be the ones to sell out, to take the technology, or that already have, or were born as a clone, right? And I'm not trying to be mean if they were. It's like, they at some level didn't have a choice on that, right? But you can make a choice to live in a better way. And then the other types of people are the souls that are like ascending, right? That figure this out, and then they'll kind of strive to grow. So those are the only two types of people. And I'm not saying that that's gospel, it's just that's what the book said, right? I just thought that was interesting. So I think whether it be like Atlanteans, Lemurians, and there's a great book that talks about like this kind of this big war between Atlanteans and Lemurians, and even before that, it's called The Galactic Human. Check it out if you get a chance. It was a really good book. But even the Mayans, the Sumerians, and the end of Egypt. I think Egypt was this long 100,000 year civilization where you look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, you look at the teachings of Thoth and the Emerald Green Tablets, and they talk about this, Egypt being a really long global civilization. And we know there's artifacts in France. They found artifacts of Egypt in all over the planet, on every continent, in the Grand Canyon and amongst other places. So I think what happens is at some point, the end of the civilization, the technology, and it all comes to an end where it turns into basically like a Sodom and Gomorrah, and that's kind of what we're seeing here. And then it sort of implodes, and everything gets corrupted. And the people that figure this out are the souls that will ascend, and they'll sort of make a decision not to participate in all that, and to say, hey, they'll sort of figure that sort of thing out, and then there's the other majority of the group that turns to all this sort of stuff and be the dark side or whatever. They just, as a soul, they kind of eventually will go back to some sort of cauldron, some sort of watchers being watched, right? And so whoever the controlling forces are, the nesting doll, they'll eventually say, okay, like you failed, you have to like go back to the soul cauldron and kind of get renewed, if you will. So I think that's what happens to these civilizations, and in Egypt there's etchings on the wall that show a lot of this civilization to be. There's like etchings of helicopters and planes, and they try and cover it up a lot, but I've watched enough stuff where there's some of those etchings are like way before we had, there's things are changing the information, because if if we consider that Tartaria was real, they had high tech 300-400 years ago, where according to mainstream history, a horse was the fastest thing on the planet for the last 1,000 years up until the Industrial Revolution. But I don't think that's true anymore. It was another civilization that had high tech. They figured things out. The society turns nefarious, things implode. They wipe the civilization out on the surface again. Certain souls go up, certain souls, get recycled, and there's a pattern here. There's evidence of that in previous civilizations that are from before, any modern tech that was around that could have done it. So they know, right? These previous civilizations have been through this cycle, and you see videos. It's popular, like this AGI and super AGI, and when we get to it, and Harold Krautsvella, Black Goo. There's that big rock in Argentina that the Third Reich and the NAZIs were obsessed with, and I think that's something that you can ingest and put in you, right? Super Soldier Talk was heavily covered that. R.I.P. James. And G-Code talks about some of that sort of stuff in Antarctica, and there's like a super intelligence, a rock that's self-aware, and it connects to Saturn, and so this sort of super intelligence is age old. It's been around a long time, and I think it's out there in the cosmos. There's probably a good side of technology intelligence and a bad side of technology intelligence. If you get into the Kerry Cassidy stuff with Mark Richards, he talks about several different AIs, 4 or 5 competing at once, and they all sort of have this different agenda. And just like we know what you put into an LLM is how it will operate, that's sort of like a very level 1 kindergarten version, right? If this AI is out there in the cosmos and is traveling, and the Johann Fritz testimony where the entire galaxy got riddled with this self-developing black goo. Check those out. Those are heavy interviews, and I think there's a lot of supporting testimonies to that. We have to take that sort of information seriously. So I think the beast system is already here. I think it's been here. This is all just a test. It's sort of a loop, and so you want to arm yourself with information. That's how you make good decisions. But at the same time, it's tough to make heartfelt decisions if you're in this fight or flight mode. If you're constantly in this mode of survival. That's why the money's so important. I think, this is a form of economic slavery, right? We don't have chains and shackles on us, but we essentially put our own bars up, thinking that we have to go to work, thinking we have to, that money's the god. So we have to sort of figure out how to get out of that cycle. I think a part of it is being smart with the finances and learning to invest, and doing something you love and finding a way to make money at it, and then doing all that. So anyway, that's all I got. Patriot for Truth out. Be strong, be smart. Think for yourself.